I am the resident manager of a gated storage unit facility at the edge of a desert town. I am the youngest to hold the position in the half-century that the place has been there. I took pride in how the prior owner liked my resume before he retired a month later. I later found out that he considered his own son a loser not worthy of inheriting the business. While he liked the way that my experience looked on paper, he would have hired anyone really. He was desperate to pass the reins off. Regardless, I was happy to take on a profession where I did not have to commute anywhere. My apartment connected to the office. Also, the pay was better than laboring under some of these slumlords that I had dealt with in the past. My life in the first year that I took on the role was a happy one. I dated a woman named Andrea who worked at a realtor's office only a few miles away. We went out on dates during any free time that we had, and our differences became clear. She believed in astrology, tarot, and mysticism, and I maintained that the material reality was all that we had as a species. She always offered to give me a reading, and I generally declined. Our forays to movie theaters helped us forget and forgive our differences, though. The job itself presented its own host of challenges. Pest control and problematic customers were constant. I enjoyed it well enough, though. I was able to keep myself entertained during the downtime. A part of my routine was to walk around the rows of units. Barriers, controlled access entry points, and one-way spikes prevented intruders. And there were also security cameras, even if they were there more for show. They were old and broken down. I enjoyed the saunter around the place, though. It was an excuse to get away from the desk and exercise a little to get some fresh air. One night, I walked by unit number 26. I was contemplating where I would take Andrea for our 1-year anniversary when I heard a splash below me. I looked down and saw a puddle. A decent amount of liquid was streaming between the crack of the garage door and the concrete. There were strict rules for when a manager could and could not make legal entry. In my state, a case of potential property damage resulting from bad plumbing is such a situation. It was excusable to search for what could be causing the issue. I went back to the office and grabbed a spare key to the unit. When I returned, I unlocked the door, fumbled the latches, and bent at the knees and slid it open. I did find the source of the flood. It was a space heater that was still plugged in. The owner who had failed to turn it off had also left a 2-liter of soda right next to it. That should have been the end of my investigation, but the contents of the unit caught my attention. I had seen some weird things in my time. Hoarders and those with attachments to the oddest of objects was not uncommon, but this unit was different. On the left wall was a corkboard with Polaroids of different faces at random locations. The photographs only had one thing in common. The individuals were all out and about in their daily lives, unaware how someone was taking snapshots of them. On the right wall was a chalkboard with various addresses scribbled on it. The information was all placed in a circle, their numbers and words within the lines. Centered on the far wall was a clay musical instrument. I recognized it as an Aztec death whistle. Below it was a desk which was clear of everything except for a single item, a black notebook. On the front of it was a sticker with an illustration of a human skull. This was not like the band logo for the Misfits or an advertisement for a random tattoo parlor. It had layers of desiccated and scarred flesh. The grin seemed to be more alive than a motionless picture should have been. Something beckoned me to turn the first page. I knew that I was committing a violation of privacy by opening somebody's journal or letters, but I had to. The page had a list of 8 names from top to bottom written in legible print. Each pen stroke brushed towards the bottom of the ruled line. Next to each was a date, and they were recent. I secured the unit and I went back to the office. I could remember some of the names, so I Googled them. They had all died of violent and sudden ends. Not a single one of their demises resulted in an arrest and prosecution of any key suspect. Later that night, I called the person above me in rank while I was still in the office. Timothy Hart was somebody that I had never met, but I had received many emails from. I had talked to him over the phone a handful of times. His voice always sounded as though he was an adamant chain smoker. I told him what I saw. Describing everything proved to be a challenge though, and I realized that I sounded crazy.
So you searched his property without his permission or knowledge?
I suppose so, I said. It's weird is all.
I don't care how bizarre his hobbies are. I'm not looking for anybody to get sued. Also, the owner is someone who's always been polite to me when I used to work on site there. Dave Avant is his name. He visited once a week sometimes and even tipped. Never had a problem with him before. And I would hate to have him feel like we were encroaching on his personal life. Do me a favor. Leave water damage alone from now on. Better to let the owners discover a potential broken pipe on their own and go from there.
I hung up, feeling sheepish, though I also thought that the new procedure was questionable at best. Still, I should have known that he would respond that way. After all, what proof did I have of any wrongdoing? The next day, I was in my chair in the living room reading something on my Kindle app when the front desk bell rang. I walked into the office and saw a man who was at least 6'2" with a military-style buzz cut. The sun glinted off the silver truck parked outside. He stood there with his arms folded and had an expression of annoyance or anger. "I would like to file a complaint," he said. "No problem," I said as I logged into the computer database and asked him for identification. "Unit 26 is mine," he said. I felt cold as I looked up his name. I worried about what he was going to say, although I had a good idea. "I walked into the space today and there was water damage everywhere. Now, I don't blame anybody here for that. What bothers me is how somebody has gone through my stuff. Nothing's missing, but things are out of place. My memory is sharp and so is my mental catalog of what I own and organize. So, what I would like to know is if you guys have had any incidents of breaking and enterings recently." "Yes, actually," I lied, feeling a bit of sweat on my brow. "Police reports already filed. They haven't caught who did it yet, but I'm sure they're doing their best. I'm so glad nothing's taken, Mr. Avant." "Well, that's good to know then. It would be a better business practice if you guys were to reach out when something's been tampered with. I made monthly payments for my little slice of space here since 15 years ago. Sorry for the inconvenience." He leaned in and he wore a cologne which smelled like oak moss. A strong hint of tobacco was also there. "I would hate to find out that this is a targeted attack against me for my religious or spiritual beliefs. The artifacts that I collect are of no one's interest but mine. I have a peeve against people who are intolerant. You're a young man and you agree with that on principle, don't you? I imagine your whole generation does. Or it should anyways." "Yes," I said, feeling a lump rise in the back of my throat. "Good. I know some of the other owners of the units around me. I'm going to ask them if they've had the same thing happen to them, to make sure that I wasn't singled out. God help the man who chose my storage space." A sense of terror filled me from that point on. I awoke from a nightmare which had been plaguing me ever since my chat with Avant. In it, I was in my bed when a power drill the size of an airplane wing pierced through my roof. It headed straight between my eyes. It was a chaotic maelstrom of drywall, insulation, and concrete in the form of a spinning machine of death. I snapped back to the real world from my hypogonic state. I was sweating heavy. I wondered if he would press charges against me for having overstepped my training. If he were to find out, my life could get complicated. I tried to shrug off these pessimistic and intrusive thoughts. I went the extra mile at work, volunteering for any kind of chore that a renter needed done. One morning, I found my Google account had been hacked. I had received a security email notifying me that somebody had accessed my information. I immediately followed the steps to remedying another intrusion. But the same thing happened the next day. I heard a dog barking outside in the middle of the night. I rolled over and tried to muffle my sense of hearing with pillows. The yelping was so persistent and loud. I stood and went through the office and stared out through the glass partition. "Where are you going?" Andrea asked as she peeled the blanket away from her face. "I'll be right back," I said. There was no animal in sight once I got to the front entranceway, but a baby blue basket which sat on the porch. Roses surrounded it. A papier-mâché skull with colored pinstripes aligned its mug, its grin wide and friendly. The head of a baby doll also sat there. The plastic had warped from the excess heat. I did not know what to make of this gift other than the letter folded into a neat square. I went back to the bedroom, grabbed the keys, and returned to the office and unlocked it to get a better look. I unfolded the letter and it had a simple sentence. "How do you like having somebody pry into everything you thought was private?" The noise of glass shattering from the rear of the property erupted behind me. I ran to the back, but not before grabbing a poker from the fireplace. I went into the bedroom and saw Andrea sitting up and a look of grave concern on her face. "Where did that noise come from?" Andrea asked. I peeled back the curtain and stared out onto the road. A sedan sat against a nearby dirt lot, and somebody had busted at the passenger side rear window. I did another perimeter check, placed the poker where I had found it, and went to bed, and I held Andrea. I went online the next day and searched through some news articles about the community. It was a part of my daily practice. But what I did not expect was to see Avant's name in one of the headlines. "Local man slain," the title read. The piece went on to explain how shortly after midnight on a Monday, Avant had been stabbed. Police found him with several wounds in an alleyway, only a block away from a bass shop. The perpetrator was not caught. Andrea and I were in bed. As I pressed her close to me, I almost fell apart. The events of the last couple weeks had started to gnaw at me, and I felt the need to tell her the story of the storage unit. Also, she had been very curious earlier if I had any knowledge of where the baskets may have come from. What if he's a hitman and the group he works for is going to come after me? I had asked. I should get the cops involved. I didn't have anything to do with his knife attack, but in case somebody tries to accuse me, you know. Oh, it was karmic retribution for the horror that he was trying to push onto you, she said. I asked her how she could be so confident in such an outlandish prospect. The way you described the notebooks led me to believe that he was sigilizing his ill intent, she said. All that means is he combined the names of those that he loathed to form negative energy. He inserted it into a symbol, redirected it towards a horrific outcome for those that he wishes ill on, and he sat back. He believed everything that he did was an act of integrity. If he had the slightest emotion towards his actions as being anything less than rewarding, then it would not work, or it would backfire. In his mind, he was a tax collector on other people's karmic debts. He was also completely in denial of how he himself must pay for it later. He sees his targets as provincial, like they're not as elite as him. That's the mindset I assume most magic practitioners have. It was a list of people that he had it out for, but your theory was that he was a hitman. I doubt it. If that were true, he wouldn't need ritualistic spells. He liked manipulating the universe to do his work for him. I nodded. Insane as it all sounded, it made perfect sense coming from her. And one other thing, she said as she locked eyes with me. He's dead, but that doesn't mean his curse can't still live on.